Assalamu alaikum. We shall continue with Ibn Ishaq Sira history. Last time in part 6, we were on page number 11. Sorry, I mistakenly said page number 12. It was page number 11 if you look at the PDF version. And now we will continue part 7. As one would expect of a book which was written in the 8th century about a great reformer, miracles are accepted as a matter of course. It does not matter if a person's alleged power to work miracles makes his early sufferings and failures unintelligible, nor does it matter if the person concerned expressly disclaimed all such powers apart from the recitation of the Holy Quran itself. The Near East has produced an enormous number of books on the miracles of saints and holy men, and it would be strange indeed if Islam had not followed in the footsteps of its predecessors in glorifying the achievements of its great leader at the expense of his human greatness. Here we are concerned simply with the literary form of such stories, the authorities that are quoted for them, and the way in which our author deals with them. To mention a few, the Prophet summoned a tree to him, and it stood before him. He told it to go back again, and back it went. So he's talking about one of the miracles of Prophet Muhammad. It is interesting to notice that the person for whose benefit this miracle was wrought regarded it as sorcery. The author's father, Ishaq bin Yasir, is responsible for the tale. Another tradition from Umr bin Ubaid, who claimed to have had it from Jabir bin Abdullah via Al Hassan, is merely a midra composed to explain Surah, where it is said that God kept the hands of Muhammad's enemies from doing him violence. The story of the throne of God shaking when the door of heaven were opened to receive Saad shows how these stories grew in the telling. Muad bin Rifa al-Zoraki reported on the authority of anyone you like among my clan that when Saad died, Gabriel visited the Prophet and asked him if it was that had caused such commotion in heaven. Whereupon Muhammad, knowing that it must be Saad, hurried off at once to find that he had died. However, that it must be Saad. However, more was said on the subject. Abdullah bin Abu Bakr from Amra bin Abdul Rahman reported that Aisha met Saad's cousin outside Mecca and asked him why he did not show more grief for one whose arrival had shaken the very throne of God. An anonymous informant claimed to have heard from Al Hassan al Basri that the pallbearers found the corpse of this fat, heavy man unexpectedly light, and the Prophet told them that there were other unseen bearers taking the weight with him. And again, it is reported that the throne shook. Sohail has a very long passage on the tradition which goes to show that serious minded man did not like this story at all. Some scholars tried to whittle away the meaning by suggesting that the shaking of the throne was a metaphor for the joy. So this is now page 12. In heaven at Saad's arrival, others claimed that the angelic bearers of the throne were meant. But Sohail will have none of this. The throne, it is Sohail or Sohaili. The throne is created object and so it can move. Therefore, none has the right to depart from the plain meaning of the words. Moreover, the tradition is authentic. The tradition is authentic, while traditions like that of Al-Bara to the effect that it was Saad's pad that shook are rightly ignored by the learned. He goes on to point out that Al-Bukhari accepted the tradition not only on the authority of Jabir but also on the report of a number of other companions of the Prophet, a further indication of the snowball growth of the legend. It's a uh, Now he's talking about a historian as finds it most surprising that Malik rejected the hadith that he had naively from the point of view of later generation. That Malik would not have it mentioned despite the soundness of its transmission and the multitude of narrators. And he adds that it may be that Malik did not regard the tradition as sound. The passage is instructive in that it shows how far Ibn Ishaq could go in the face of one of the most learned of his contemporaries in Medina. Posterity has sided with Ibn Ishaq on this matter, but Malik clearly had many on his side at the time, men who would not take at its face value a story which they could not reject out of hand as he did with the weight of contemporary opinion behind it. Another feature that stands out clearly from time to time in the assertion in the is the insertion of popular stories on the Gordic models. For the sake of reader, I have rendered these stories in accord with modern usage as the repetition of the same words and the same answer again and again is intolerable to the modern adult. Such stories are the stock in trade of the Arabian cast and the storyteller all the world over and invariably lead up to the climax which it is the speaker's intention to withhold until he has his audience on tiptoe. A good example of such a story is the narrative of Muhammad's arrival in Medina and the invitation of one clan after another, always declined with the same words. After giving due weight to the pressure of hagiology on the writer and his learning towards the Shia, one must, I think, affirm that the life of Muhammad is regarded with honesty and truthfulness and to an impartiality which is rare in such writings. Who can read the story of Al-Zabir who was given his life, family, and belonging but did not want to live with the best man of his people had been slain? Without admitting that here we have honesty and truthfulness to impartiality, which is rare in such writings. Who can read the story of Al-Zabir who was given his life, family, and belongings, but did not want to live with the with did not want to live when the best man of his people had been slain, without admitting that here we have a true account of what actually happened. Similarly, who but an impartial historian would have included verses in which the noble, generous character of the Jews of the Hijaz was lauded and lamented. The skepticism of the earlier writers seems to me excessive and unjustified. So this is the writer, talking about the impartiality of Ibn Ishaq, because Ibn Ishaq is considered discredited by some in at least some parts of his history. We have only to compare later lives of Muhammad to see the difference between the historical and the ideal Muhammad. So let me move on to the next page. It's the same page, but other part of the same page. Doubts and misgivings about the authenticity of the poems in the Sira are expressed so often by Ibn Hisham that no reference to them need be given here. Nevertheless, one should be on one's guard against the tendency to condemn all the poetry out of hand. What Ibn Hisham says about the poetry of those who took part in the Battle of Badr, whether or not it includes the verses of Hassan bin Sabit or Hassan bin Sabit. Hassan bin Sabit, namely these verses um, of Abu Usama, are the most authentic of those attributed to the man of Badr. Cast grave doubt on the authenticity of a large section of the poetry of the Sirah. Nevertheless, Ibn Ishaq is not to be blamed for the inclusion of much that is undoubtedly spurious without a thorough investigation which has not yet been undertaken. The poems he cites on page 284 and 728 he got from Asim bin Qatada, while those on page 500, 590, 789, and 793 come from Abdullah bin Abu Bakr. We know too that Musa bin Uqaba cited verses. An early critic of poetry. I think we should stop here. It is page 12 and paragraph 1. We shall continue in part 8 now.